Imagine this, an elderly woman, just minding her business, walking down the street when a biker suddenly approaches her. He's angry, aggressive, and without warning, he assaults her in broad daylight.
But here's the twist: this isn't just any elderly woman.
Her son, a Navy SEAL, is thousands of miles away, but he's about to learn that his mother is in danger.
What happens next? You won't believe it.
The biker, completely unaware of who he's messing with, has no idea what kind of storm he's about to stir up. Meanwhile, the woman is left fighting back in a situation that feels helpless until her son finds out. This is more than just a random assault.
It's a moment where the true power of family and strength is about to collide.
But before we dive into the showdown that's about to unfold, there's one thing you need to know: this biker doesn't know what's coming for him.
And the question on everyone's mind is, will the son make it back in time to protect his mother, or will the biker get away with it? Stay tuned to find out.
The biker had never thought twice about the woman he'd just accosted.
She wasn't anyone special, just another elderly person walking down the sidewalk, someone who wouldn't put up much of a fight. He was frustrated, on edge, and looking for a target.
The anger bubbling inside him from a bad day was looking for an outlet, and she seemed like the perfect one. The elderly woman had barely a moment to react before he shoved her hard, sending her stumbling back.
"Hey! What are you doing?" she cried out, trying to steady herself. The biker didn't listen.
His eyes were wild, his breath short. It wasn't about the woman, it was about his own frustrations that had boiled over. He was drunk with rage, oblivious to the fact that in doing this, he was about to awaken a sleeping giant. The woman, despite her age, wasn't one to back down easily. She had seen her share of hardships in life. Her hands, though worn from years of work, were still strong, and her spirit was unyielding. As the biker towered over her, demanding she hand over her purse, she locked eyes with him, her expression unshaken.
"You really think this is the way you want to spend your day?"
she muttered under her breath, but loud enough for him to hear.
The biker sneered. "You want me to teach you a lesson?"
But it wasn't the biker's threats that caught her attention. It was the ringing in her pocket, the phone call she'd been waiting for. Her son, a Navy SEAL, had just finished a mission overseas. He had promised her he'd call as soon as it was over. She answered the phone without hesitation, trying to stay calm, even as the man before her grew angrier.
"Mom?"
came her son's voice, slightly muffled from the line.
"Are you okay?"
"Yes, dear," she said, keeping her tone steady, though her heart was racing.
"I'm fine. Just dealing with a little problem here." "Problem?"
her son repeated, his voice tightening.
"What do you mean?"
But before she could respond, the biker took another step forward, this time shoving her again, more aggressively.
"Quit stalling. Give me your purse." That was enough.
Her son, far away, could feel the tension in his mother's voice.
He didn't need to hear anything else.
His instincts, honed from years of training, flared to life. His mind instantly went to his mother's safety, the one thing he'd always worried about. It didn't matter that he was on the other side of the world, he had to protect her.
He would get home, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, back on the street, the elderly woman's mind raced as the situation escalated. She needed to survive, to stay calm.
She didn't know if her son could get there in time, but she knew one thing: she wasn't going to let this man intimidate her. She stood tall, refusing to back down, despite the obvious disadvantage in strength. She would do whatever it took to keep herself safe until help arrived. But help was far from where she stood. The biker's frustration only grew as he saw the woman's calm demeanor.
It confused him. Wasn't she supposed to be scared? Wasn't she supposed to cave in, give him what he wanted? He wasn't used to being defied, especially by someone like her. His hand clenched around the handle of his bike, but even as he prepared to force her hand, something about her steadiness caught him off guard. Just as the biker was about to take another step, something else interrupted the standoff. A car rolled up beside them. It wasn't a police officer or anyone who could have been seen as a threat.
No, it was just a passerby, another stranger who'd witnessed the scene. The elderly woman wasn't sure whether she felt relief or fear from this new development. She knew it was a good thing, but what if the biker escalated his attack? "Hey! What's going on here?" the stranger called out from the vehicle. The biker, sensing an opportunity to defuse the situation, hesitated. For a brief second, he looked around, as if considering his options. His eyes darted back and forth between the woman, the passerby, and the street, calculating his next move. "Nothing. Just get lost," he shouted, his voice sharp. But the passerby wasn't backing down. "No, I'm not leaving. I'm calling the cops. You need to leave her alone." The biker's eyes narrowed, but before he could retort, the woman spoke again, this time more forcefully than before. "I don't need you to fight my battles," she said, looking the biker dead in the eye. "I can handle myself." The biker hesitated. That defiance was the final straw for him. The situation was slipping away from his control, and in that moment, his mind started racing, his anxiety creeping in. The anger that had fueled him started to feel out of place. He looked to the passerby, and for a moment, it seemed like he might back off. But then, his phone buzzed. It was a message, an urgent one, and he glanced at it quickly. His eyes widened, and the color drained from his face. Something about the message froze him in place. Her son had arrived. The biker didn't know it yet, but the elderly woman's son had tracked down his location. His military training had prepared him for moments like these. The minute he received the alert from his mother's call, he'd pulled strings to get the nearest helicopter, the nearest military transport, whatever it took to return home. And now he was just moments away. The biker glanced nervously over his shoulder, his eyes scanning the area, searching for any signs of danger. He was on edge, knowing something was off, but he couldn't put his finger on it. He wasn't prepared for what came next. Just as he turned back toward the elderly woman, a figure appeared in the distance, tall, confident, moving with purpose. His eyes locked onto the biker's, and the biker felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just any man. He could feel it. The military man, the one who had arrived so quickly, didn't seem to be anyone's ordinary civilian. There was something about him, something dangerous in the way he moved. The tension in the air thickened, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. The biker took a step back, realizing that maybe he had underestimated this whole situation. He had no idea who he was really up against. His fear grew. The elderly woman's son was here, and this wasn't a game anymore. He had no way of knowing what would happen next. In that brief instant, he knew his life was about to change, he just didn't know how or when. And as the figure drew closer, the only thing the biker could do was wonder, had he pushed his luck too far? As the figure approached, the biker's nerves began to unravel. His mind raced, frantically trying to make sense of what was happening. He had been in countless confrontations before, but this one felt different, intense, personal. He was no longer the aggressor in control. Something had shifted, and he didn't know how to regain the upper hand. The man walking toward him wasn't just anyone. He was a Navy SEAL, a trained warrior, a protector. The biker could see it in the way the man carried himself. He didn't walk like someone who was scared or uncertain. There was a quiet power about him, the kind that only came from years of training, discipline, and dedication. The biker's stomach churned. He wasn't sure if it was the adrenaline or fear, but something deep inside him told him this wasn't a fight he wanted to finish. The elderly woman, though bruised and shaken, remained calm. She had been through too much in her life to let something like this rattle her. Her son had arrived. The moment she heard his voice on the phone, a wave of relief washed over her. But as she watched the biker's body language shift, she knew that the true power of the situation was unfolding. The biker didn't know what he was about to face. "Get away from my mother," the Navy SEAL's voice was cold, but steady. There was no question in his tone. It wasn't a request, it was an order. The biker froze, his hand still gripping his purse.
He wasn't sure how to react. He had always prided himself on being tough, on being the one who made others back down. But now, facing the calm and unwavering figure of the SEAL, he felt a crack form in his confidence. It was as though he were staring into the eyes of something far greater than himself, something he couldn't fight, something he couldn't defeat. "I don't want any trouble, man," the biker muttered, stepping back slightly, his voice a little shakier than he intended. The edge in his tone was gone now, replaced by a hint of fear. The Navy SEAL's eyes never wavered. He was there to protect his mother, and he wasn't going to let some street thug threaten her without facing consequences. He wasn't going to engage in some back-and-forth fight. No, he was smarter than that. He had learned years ago that some things didn't require brute force, they required precision. "You've already caused enough trouble," the SEAL said, his voice a low growl. "Now, you'll leave. Or I'll make you leave." The biker swallowed hard, his mind whirling as he tried to figure out a way out of the situation. But the calm confidence in the Navy SEAL's voice made it clear that there was no way out. The biker took another step back, his mind calculating how fast he could get on his bike and leave. He didn't want to find out just how dangerous this man could be. The fear that had been creeping up in him was now undeniable. He took one last glance at the elderly woman, who stood tall despite the assault she'd just endured, and then he turned and ran, hopping on his bike and speeding off into the distance. The Navy SEAL didn't move an inch. He had done what he came for. His mother was safe. The elderly woman, her hands still trembling from the adrenaline, looked up at her son, a quiet smile forming on her lips. She had always known he was capable, always knew he had the strength to protect her. But now, seeing him standing before her, she couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of pride. "You got here fast," she said softly, her voice full of relief. The Navy SEAL nodded, his eyes softening as he surveyed her. "I wasn't going to let anything happen to you, Mom." They stood there for a moment, in silence, just absorbing the gravity of the situation. Her son had come through, just like he always did, just like he always promised. And she had weathered the storm, proving to herself and to him that she was still strong, still capable. After a few moments, the Navy SEAL glanced around, making sure the area was clear. "You're okay now," he said. "I'll stay with you until the police arrive." The elderly woman nodded, though she wasn't in a hurry to bring the police into it. She'd handled situations like this before, and she wasn't one to make a scene. But she understood her son's need for closure, for security. She'd let him handle things, let him do what he needed to do to feel like everything was okay again. As the sounds of distant sirens grew louder, the Navy SEAL stayed close to his mother, his body tense but his demeanor calm. He had learned to stay alert, to always be prepared for what was next. He knew the dangers of the world, and he wasn't going to let anything slip through the cracks when it came to his family. But there was something else in his mind as he stood there, beside his mother, watching the police approach. He had been in dangerous situations before, faced life or death scenarios in hostile environments. But this was different. This wasn't just about fighting enemies abroad. This was personal. This was family. And when it came to protecting the people he loved, there was no compromise. The police arrived a few minutes later, taking statements from both the elderly woman and her son. They tried to gather information on the biker, but he was long gone, disappearing into the city before anyone could get a good look at him. The elderly woman didn't press charges, as she had no desire to escalate things further. She was just glad her son was there, that he had come through when she needed him most. As the night fell, the two of them made their way back to her home. The Navy SEAL had been through countless operations, but nothing compared to the relief he felt when he knew his mother was safe in her own home. As they sat together, the weight of the day's events began to settle in. There was no need to speak much, they both knew the unspoken bond they shared, the bond forged through years of love, sacrifice, and strength. And yet, there was a quiet understanding between them. The world was unpredictable, dangerous at times, but together, they could face whatever came next. He had always been there for her, and she had always been there for him. They were a team, no matter the distance or the danger.
As the night drew to a close, the Navy SEAL stood up, looking out the window at the calm street. "I'll stay the night, Mom. Just in case." She smiled softly, her heart full. "I know, dear. I know." And in that moment, the true strength of their relationship shone brighter than any battle. It wasn't about the physical fights or the dangers that lurked in the world. It was about the bond between them, the unbreakable connection that no biker, no assault, could ever shatter. As the lights dimmed in the quiet room, the final lesson settled in: love and family could conquer even the darkest of days. The world would always have its challenges, but as long as they had each other, they would always come out on top.